Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Chiara Poggi. Chiara Poggi was born in Vigai, Italy, on March 31, 1981. She studied economics and landed a job as a financier at a large company. She was a delicate girl with expressive blue eyes. She was determined to advance her career and become a manager, with the ultimate goal of starting her own business. To achieve this, she focused on her studies and graduated. Alongside her professional ambitions, Chiara also wanted to start a family. At that time, she had been in a relationship with a man named Alberto for 7 years. Unfortunately, all her dreams seemed to stop there, as fate had other plans for her. On August 13, 2007, at approximately 9:12 a.m., Chiara was going about her daily routine when someone knocked on her door. She opened it, unaware that this decision would lead to her death just a few hours later. At 1:50 p.m., Alberto called the Italian emergency services, 118, to report a tragedy at his girlfriend's home. Alberto had discovered Chiara's body. He explained that he had visited and found her lying in a pool of blood. When the dispatcher asked if he could help the victim, Alberto said he couldn't bear to look at the scene and had already left to contact the police. He provided the address and implied that his girlfriend was already dead when he called. When asked why he did not wait for the police at the scene, the Alberto explained that the house was located on a dead-end street, making it hard for the police to find. He decided to go to the police himself and bring them to the tragedy scene to prevent confusion. The Carabinieri arrived after being directed by the emergency services dispatcher. All the doors of the house were locked, so the officers had to climb over the fence. Once inside the kitchen, they discovered signs of a struggle. The Chiara seemed to have been attacked while cooking. Dishes were scattered, and there were open boxes containing a knitting needle, which suggested a confrontation might have taken place. The police also found initial evidence of a violent crime. There were drops of blood on the floor. And in the room near the exit, they discovered a potholder and white slippers that were later confirmed to belong to the Chiara. The Carabinieri entered the next room and discovered Chiara lying face down on the steps near the basement entrance. She appeared to have been taken by surprise, as she was still wearing her pink summer pajamas. Chiara showed signs of a severe beating. It seemed she had been struck multiple times with a heavy object, likely a hammer. The police officers quickly spotted important evidence in the pool of blood, a strand of hair that obviously did not belong to Chiara and a distinctive shoe print left in the dried blood. The lack of warmth in the Chiara's body suggested that she had been killed a few hours earlier. The police quickly contacted Chiara's parents. Rita, the mother, was on vacation in Trentino and had missed the call. She called back around 3:30 p.m. and was so distraught by the news that she nearly fainted. She rushed back to the city. When Rita arrived at the police station, her husband, Giuseppe, Chiara's father, was there. Nicola Stassi, Alberto's father, was also there when his son was brought to the station. Alberto called his father for support. Alberto, 20, shared his story of events with the police by the time Chiara's parents arrived. Alberto said he called Chiara at 9:45 a.m., but she did not answer. He was not concerned at first, thinking she might still be asleep. After noon, he made several attempts to contact her on both her cell phone and her home phone, but received no response. At 11:15 a.m., he decided to go play golf. After returning from his match at around 12:30 p.m., Alberto found all of Chiara's doors locked and she was not answering his phone calls. Worried, he climbed over the fence and tried to open the door, but it was locked. He then broke in through the kitchen window, the only way into the house. Inside, he found the TV on. At first, he thought Chiara might still be asleep in her room. However, when he could not find her, he went into the kitchen and saw drops of blood on the dishes. He then went into the living room, where he discovered her body, leaving him in shock. It's strange that he didn't approach Chiara to check on her or try to help. Instead, he ran to get the investigator. At that moment, she was still alive, and she might have been saved. Rather than ensuring his girlfriend was okay or providing first aid, he left the house and headed to the police station. Once in the car, he called for an ambulance. During the police interrogation, they noticed his odd behavior and questioned why he didn't check if the girl was breathing. Instead of helping her, he just ran away and called the police. Alberto explained that he was scared and confused, which led him to call for help right away. However, he could have stayed, called for medics, and waited for the ambulance while performing CPR. He claimed he left because he felt unsafe in the house after the attack and sought protection from police. The Alberto spent the entire day at the police station, and around midnight, he was getting ready to meet with the police again to answer their questions. Meanwhile, forensic experts were carefully examining the crime scene and were puzzled by a footprint found in a pool of the Chiara's blood. They asked Alberto to show them his shoes. He was wearing special white golf shoes that were spotless. He claimed he had been wearing them when he arrived at his girlfriend's house. However, this raised suspicions because the floor around the body was covered in blood. How could someone walk around in such a bloody scene without getting any blood on their shoes? There wasn't a single drop of blood on the soles, and the Alberto couldn't provide a clear explanation for this. The police decided to question Alberto about his relationship with Chiara, the murdered girl. Alberto described their relationship as wonderful, claiming they had very few problems. Like any couple, they occasionally argued, but these conflicts were minor and quickly resolved. The police then asked him for more details about the events leading up to her death to help establish a timeline and identify any suspicious activity. However, Alberto offered no significant information. The police took his fingerprints and ultimately released him due to a lack of evidence, keeping him at the police station for just under a day. Finally, around 7 a.m., Alberto got into his father's car and went home. On August 17th, when police examined the search history and files on Alberto's computer, he claimed he woke up early that morning, around 9 a.m., and was working on his thesis while trying to call his girlfriend, after which he went to play golf. Evidence confirmed that he was home, fed his dog, and then left the house. Although it seemed that Alberto had an alibi, the police remained suspicious. The police continued their investigation to reconstruct the timeline of the attack. They were particularly focused on how the crime occurred and still needed to identify the murder weapon. Based on the condition of the Chiara's body, it appeared the attacker used a metal object, possibly something like a hammer with a pointed end or an ice pick. At that point, the forensic report indicated that Chiara was likely murdered between 9 and 10 in the morning. When the police examined the prime Alberto's mobile phone records, they discovered that his mother called him daily just before 10 a.m. Elizabeth, the mother, confirmed that she spoke to her son that day to check on a friend, seemingly validating his alibi and suggesting he could not have committed the murder during that time. However, upon further investigation of the call logs, the police found that the mother did not call her son that day, raising suspicions. Alberto's motives are unclear. Friends confirmed that Chiara and Alberto had a wonderful relationship, with only minor disagreements that are typical of any young couple. A friend named Marco saw Alberto the day after the tragic event and noticed that Alberto seemed distressed. He refused to eat and spoke very little, often expressing his deep sadness over Chiara's death. Meanwhile, the investigation was progressing. The police had gathered preliminary investigation materials, autopsy reports, and numerous witness testimonies about the couple. After August 20th, forensic experts continued analyzing the evidence, including hair found in a pool of blood that did not belong to the Chiara. They also examined materials collected from under Chiara's fingernails. Additionally, several blood splatters were discovered in the house that did not seem to match Chiara's, suggesting they might belong to the assailant. On the morning of August 22nd, Alberto visited the police station to obtain some documents. He spent a few hours speaking with the police, who were hoping to gather new information from him. Additionally, at 2 p.m., Alberto was scheduled to take part in an interrogation with the prosecutor present. With police showing increased interest, the Alberto was preparing for his meeting with his lawyer. By this time, Alberto had already spent over 26 hours at the station, providing the police with all the information they requested. He repeated his account of the events from August 13th. But the police were more focused on the evening of the 12th, the night before the bloody massacre took place. That night, the couple ordered 2 pizzas from a nearby restaurant and spent the evening eating and watching TV. Alberto then went home. Police scrutinized every detail of his statement for any inconsistencies, especially questioning why Alberto left after dinner. Throughout the investigation, Alberto repeatedly maintained that he had nothing to do with his girlfriend Chiara's death. The prosecution remained skeptical. He questions why there was no blood on Alberto's white sneakers as he moved around the house. Was he really that cautious? Why did Alberto leave on the night of the 12th instead of staying with Chiara? And why did he not help her when he found her unconscious? Unexpectedly, Chiara's neighbor provided some information. At around 9 a.m., she noticed a bicycle parked near the entrance to Chiara's house. As a cyclist, she found this strange, as she had never seen Chiara or Alberto riding such a bicycle. Later, the bicycle was spotted near Chiara's fence. The neighbor, who was knowledgeable about bicycles, realized that it was a women's model equipped with unusual accessories not usually found on regular bicycles. The woman did not think about what would happen next. She looked out her window around 10 o'clock or 10:30 a.m. and noticed that the vehicle was no longer by the neighbor's fence. This information caught the police's attention, as it might be an important clue. The police realized that finding this bike could significantly advance their investigation, as locating the owner might lead them to the killer. However, their search for this type of bike hit a dead end because the description provided was too vague. Later, another neighbor, a 47-year-old woman, contacted the police. She reported seeing a bike near Chiara's house at 9:30 a.m. and confirmed it was a women's model with a new color, although some details did not match. It's possible that one of the neighbors had remembered those details incorrectly. Meanwhile, over several days, several lawyers defended Alberto, including his brothers, Giulio and Giuseppe Colli, who worked in the Vai Giovanna Bar Association. However, by this time, the police had discovered the complicated love story between Chiara and Alberto. The love between the Chiara and Alberto was genuine, and their relationship was going well. This was evident to those who knew them and was reflected in their frequent exchanges of affectionate messages. They hardly ever argued, and when they did, the disagreements were minor and quickly resolved. However, in the week leading up to the incident, some unusual changes were observed in their relationship. It seems that Chiara has recently stopped wanting to see Alberto, and they have started sleeping in separate rooms even when he stays overnight. Alberto attributes this behavior to the fact that he prefers to sleep in a double bed in Chiara's brother's room, where he finds it more comfortable. There were very few photographs of the couple together, raising concerns about their relationship. Instead, the Alberto's secret folder contained hundreds of photos of women's feet in shoes, leading to suspicions that the couple's seemingly happy exterior was hiding deeper issues. This raised the question, could Alberto's unusual fetish have been connected to the murder? The case took a dramatic turn 43 days after Chiara's death, when police discovered Alberto's sister's bicycle, matching a neighbor's description. Blood was found on the pedals, which was later confirmed through laboratory testing to be Chiara's. However, Alberto's sister had a solid alibi, as she was at work at the time of the incident. Initially, Alberto was believed to have borrowed his sister's bicycle. The family and the community were shocked. They did not believe Chiara's boyfriend was guilty until the very end. However, when traces of her DNA were found on the pedals of the bike, they had no choice but to accept his guilt. Relatives were also shocked by Alberto's behavior. He met with them several times after the tragedy and still steadfastly maintained his innocence. The parents displayed clear signs of their grief. The lawyer passionately defended his client, trying to explain the presence of the Chiara's blood on the pedals, despite the significant amount found, which was not just a few drops. The defense attempted to dismiss this evidence by suggesting it could be related to menstruation and other implausible theories. Ultimately, despite these efforts, Alberto was arrested. On September 28, the judge reviewed the case file and determined that there was not enough evidence against the suspect, leading to Alberto's immediate release from prison. The case file was then sent back to the prosecution for further examination. Police had found a significant amount of specific pornographic material on the Alberto's computer. They believed that his girlfriend might have discovered his secret fetish, which could have caused tension between them. A conflict arose, and this seems plausible considering that on August 12, the day before the incident, the Alberto had been working on his laptop at Chiara's place and had left it there, giving her access to the stored information. Alberto had many photographs of women's shoes that he seemed to have taken himself, particularly during a recent trip to London shortly before his relationship with Chiara started to decline. Additionally, there were images capturing private moments between the Chiara and Alberto. These photos were blurred, but the girl appeared to be quite embarrassed in them. It's possible that the Alberto's specific preferences in intimacy contributed to their disagreements. Alberto acknowledged that he has certain fetishes, but he claimed that the Chiara always accepted, and it never caused any issues between them. On November 3, 2008, Alberto was charged once more. Police believed they had sufficient evidence to link him to Chiara's murder. It was clear that the Alberto knew the victim well, as he had unrestricted access to her home. This was supported by the fact that nothing was broken or stolen, and the Chiara was found wearing her home clothes. The strongest evidence was a footprint found in the Chiara's blood. It was a size 42 shoe print that matched the Alberto's foot size. After committing the crime, Alberto replaced his old shoes with a brand new pair that he wore during his first interrogation. Despite blood prints being found on the bicycle pedals, he persisted in denying any involvement. It seems he successfully disposed of the sneakers he wore when he left the Chiara's house after the murder. On February 24, 2009, during the preliminary hearing, the prosecution requested a 30-year prison sentence. Although they had initially requested a life sentence, after reviewing the case documents, the judge determined that further improvements were needed. He identified many of the evidence as being implausible. Extensive research was conducted, including a reconstruction of the events using computer models. A comprehensive model of Chiara's house was built, allowing the police to track the killer's movements. On August 13, 2009, a detailed report was submitted to the court. According to this report, the Alberto turned on his computer at 9:35 a.m. and viewed several pornographic photographs. He continued this activity until 12:20 p.m. and identified only 3 possible time intervals during which the murder could have occurred. The house alarm was deactivated at 9:12 a.m., and there is no information about Alberto's activities between then and 9:35 a.m. The second time window for the murder was from 12:20 p.m. to 12:46 p.m., as the Alberto called Chiara's mobile phone from his home shortly after 12:46 p.m. There was also a time frame available for the murder from 12:46 p.m. to 1:26 p.m. The forensic expert determined that the Chiara likely died between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, suggesting that the earlier time frame was more plausible. Meanwhile, the defense pointed out several mistakes made by the police during the investigation. The forensic expert noted that evidence was mishandled. There were numerous errors and inconsistencies, including the failure to collect the Chiara's fingerprints. Police also did not investigate other people who may have used the bicycle seen near Chiara's house, which weakened the prosecution's case. Additionally, the provisional time frame established suggests that Alberto had no more than 23 minutes to commit the crime, set up the scene, escape, and dispose of the shoes. Alberto lived a mile from Chiara's house, and if he had been able to ride his bicycle to Chiara's house, it would have been physically difficult and inconsistent with the timeline of events. Despite this, the prosecution believed he could have done so. On December 17th, the judge left the courtroom to consider his verdict. The prosecution asked for a 30-year prison sentence. However, they failed to present convincing evidence of his guilt. There were no bloody shoes, video footage, witness testimony, or obvious motives linking Alberto to the murder. Ultimately, the judge found Alberto not guilty. The verdict shocked the local community, which had expected a different outcome and labeled Alberto a murderer. However, the case did not end there. Chiara's family filed an appeal on November 8, 2011, leading to a new trial. This hearing lasted several weeks, during which the public and media were barred from the courtroom, allowing journalists only to enter when the decision was announced. The court acquitted the Alberto Stasi once more during a retrial on April 18, 2013. The lawyer emphasized that the charges lacked grounding and that there was insufficient evidence. He also argued that it would have been impossible for Alberto to commit the murder and cover up the evidence in just 23 minutes. Following the death of Alberto's father, who was killed in a Pavia hospital on April 9, 2014, a new phase in the investigation began. This phase included various pieces of evidence, such as computer modeling and a thorough analysis of a bicycle found in the Alberto's home. Unexpectedly, during this investigation, Alberto confessed to murdering Chiara. The case was so complex that without this confession, he likely would have been acquitted again. However, under public pressure, he ultimately admitted his guilt. On December 17, 2014, 37-year-old Alberto Stasi received a 16-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €1 million in compensation to the Chiara's family. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Chad Amelia. Chad Amelia was born in 1992 in Santa Clara, California, USA. His parents, of Irish descent, married young and then moved to the United States. They were eager to pursue the American dream, a common goal for millions. When they arrived in the United States, they found themselves isolated in a foreign country, with no one nearby to support them. Communication with relatives was only possible by phone. Despite the distance, the couple and their children remained determined and did not return to Ireland. Chad grew up with his younger brother Shane. They got along and supported each other from a young age. Following the example of their parents, difficulties shaped their characters, making them kind and fair. Both boys were always ready to help others in need. Chad, the eldest, was especially hardworking. He played baseball and football in high school, and when a coach noticed his talent, he was given a spot on the school team. This opportunity fueled his passion for sports, and he became a talented football player. After graduating from high school, he attended California State University, Chicago, graduating in 2018. Soon after, he joined Camarilla, an accounting firm. At the same time, he continued his studies in economics to improve his accounting skills. Known for being sociable and kind, Chad easily connects with people. One spring day in 2018, 20-year-old Chad was walking his dog in the park when he unexpectedly met Bryn Spetcher, a smart, friendly, and determined 27-year-old girl. Like Chad, Bryn is from Chicago, Illinois. She moved to Washington when she was older, making some changes to pursue her education and find a good job. Bryn was born with hearing problems and was nearly deaf from a young age, forcing her to wear a hearing aid. This made her feel out of place in the educational environment, leading to various challenges. However, it also fueled her desire to help others, as she tried to maintain a positive attitude. Despite the difficulties of moving to California, Bryn earned a degree in audiology, a significant accomplishment that she had long pursued. Her career was just beginning, and she quickly secured a position as an audiologist at a hospital in Los Angeles. She wanted to help others who, like her, faced hearing challenges. Bryn lived in California for about a year but was not sociable and often took time off from work, so she did not have a wide circle of acquaintances, communicating only with a few friends with whom she could spend weekends. Chad changed her life dramatically. They started talking and quickly realized that they had many common interests. Chad was very fond of his smart and attractive girlfriend. He often talked about her to his friends, and he expressed his happiness. She seemed pleased too, eager to share stories about him with her friends. They seemed like the perfect couple, visiting each other often. On May 27, 2018, Bryn went to her boyfriend's house, bringing along her beloved service dog, a husky guide dog. Her boyfriend, Chad, also had a dog, and the two animals got along well. The following weekend, about a month later, Bryn was planning a business trip to another city, so she wanted to spend some time relaxing with her Chad before the trip. And Chad lived in the Tarzana Oaks area of California. That evening, one of Chad's neighbors, a guy named Vinny, returned home around 2 a.m. He spent about half an hour with Chad and Bryn, who were watching their favorite TV series. Vinny then went to sleep in his room, while another neighbor slept, using earplugs and sleeping pills. That night, Bryn and Chad decided to smoke marijuana. In California, marijuana use is legal, having been legalized in 1996. Chad took a few breaths and quickly relaxed. Bryn at first, she didn't feel anything, so she tried again. This time, she felt terrible. Her mind went blank, her vision blurred, and she had trouble breathing. She told her boyfriend, who went into the kitchen to get her some water. She felt so bad that she feared for her life and asked Chad to stay with her. Chad, who had used before, didn't have the same problems and was calm enough to support her. Bryn admits that she thought she was going to die. She began hallucinating about dying in pain and felt like she wouldn't survive the night. She was angry at her boyfriend because he seemed fine and suspected that he was setting her up. In her hallucinations, he became the bad guy who orchestrated her death through drug use. She also heard voices in her head urging her to kill him, and Bryn realized that the only way she could survive was to get rid of her boyfriend. Suddenly, she stood up and went into the kitchen, where she picked up a large knife. Bryn returned to the living room, where Chad was still lying on the couch. She stabbed him multiple times in the chest. At that moment, she heard voices urging her to continue stabbing. She couldn't resist them because she felt out of control. Bryn experienced a fierce cruelty and aggression she had never felt before. The hallucinations continued, and with each stab, she felt relief. Meanwhile, the neighbors were in other rooms on the second floor. One was fast asleep and didn't hear anything. The second neighbor, Vinny, heard some rustling from downstairs, but there was no loud noise or screaming, so he didn't think much of it. Vinny assumed the couple was watching TV. After a while, he heard Chad's voice asking Bryn to leave him alone and call for help. The voice got louder and more frightening, which scared Vinny. To find out what was going on, he started going down from the first floor. When he walked in, the first thing he noticed was the frightened dogs. When he entered the room, he saw the furniture scattered everywhere. In the living room, Bryn had a knife in her hand, covered in blood. Chad lay there, wheezing, his eyes wide with horror as he looked at Vinny. Chad's hand was slashed by her, defenseless, but Bryn, in her frenzy, stabbed him with a kitchen knife. a large gash across his chest that Bryn continued to attack with a look of fury on her face. Vinny yelled at her to stop, but instead, Bryn turned to look at him with a blank expression. She was still holding the knife. Feeling the danger, Vinny quickly went upstairs and knocked on the second neighbor's door to warn him. However, the neighbor was fast asleep and did not respond. So Vinny grabbed his cell phone and ran downstairs. Fearing for his life, he ran out onto the street and quickly called 911. Once outside, Vinny used his phone to call emergency services. His screams attracted the attention of the neighbors, who ran out to see what was going on, making Vinny feel safer. He started banging on the windows and shouting for the girl to stop. The neighbors, seeing the situation inside the house, also started shouting. Everyone was scared and shocked. Meanwhile, inside the apartment, Bryn continued to attack Chad, not paying attention to the commotion outside. Within minutes, the police met Vinny, who was sobbing about the events that were happening. He could only point to the apartment where the violent attack was taking place. The police rushed into the house to intervene. In the living room, they found Bryn repeatedly stabbing a young man in the chest. The room was covered in blood, and although the young man showed no signs of life, Bryn did not stop. The police considered using force to end the attack. However, when ordered to drop the knife, Bryn began stabbing herself in the neck. The police quickly used a stun gun, but it was ineffective. Bryn continued to harm herself, so the police used a baton to disarm her. It took 9 blows to knock the knife out of her hand, even breaking her arm in several places, but she seemed completely unaware of the injuries. Only then did Bryn drop the knife. In addition to stabbing Chad, she also stabbed her dog several times. When other rescue services arrived, everyone was shocked by the horrific scene, which looked like a bloodbath. Doctors tried to resuscitate Vinny, but he was in shock and could not remember or explain what had happened in the house. The experience had a profound effect on him and he needed a long recovery period with the help of psychologists. The dog was treated at a veterinary clinic and eventually recovered from his injuries. Unfortunately, by the time the police arrived, Chad was dead. There was a lot of blood from the stab wound and witnesses to the incident were present. These witnesses were neighbors who had come out of the house when they heard screams. They described what they saw to the police, but could not understand how such a brutal attack could have happened or what had provoked it. Chad had 108 stab wounds, most of them concentrated around the heart and neck. Some of the wounds were superficial and not life-threatening, while others penetrated vital organs. It is difficult to determine which specific wound caused Chad's death. He also had multiple self-defense wounds. Bryn after self-inflicted wounds to her neck. She was rushed to the hospital, where she was placed on a ventilator and intubated. When police tried to communicate with her, they used only a piece of paper and a pen, as she was unable to fully respond because of the life support equipment. Once she was stabilized in the hospital, she was able to communicate fully. Various tests showed traces of mild substances in her blood. Doctors noted that the levels were very low and did not pose a threat to her life or mental health. It is unusual for such a small amount to cause such an extreme reaction. However, doctors did not rule out the possibility that her blood levels had dropped. When Bryn spoke to the police, she claimed that she did not remember anything that had happened. As a result, she did not know where Chad was or what had happened to him. She believed that her injuries may have been caused by an assault with the intent to rape her. In addition to the neck injury, she also suffered a broken neck and a bludgeoned arm, which was how the police safely disarmed her of the knife. However, she did not remember the event either. Bryn could not believe the police account of how she attacked and stabbed her boyfriend. Despite this, she did not seem to feel remorse for her actions toward Chad. Bryn refused to comment further and immediately requested a lawyer, as she considered herself innocent and blamed the incident on the effects of drugs. The last thing she remembered was being discharged from the hospital after 4 days, on May 31st, when she was immediately arrested for Chad's murder. Eventually, she was able to share a more detailed account of the events of that tragic night. Bryn recounted her story. She had gone to visit her boyfriend with a dog and they watched TV together. Around 10:30 p.m., when Chad stepped outside to smoke, she joined him, saying she wanted to try it too. She then began to feel unwell, hallucinating and hearing voices in her head. Bryn had difficulty breathing, felt disoriented and nauseous. She then had a hallucination blaming Chad for her condition. The hallucination urged her to kill Chad, claiming it was the only way to stop her bad feelings. Although she initially resisted, the hallucinations grew stronger. Feeling like she was going to die, Bryn attacked Chad with a knife but insisted that she had no control at the time, claiming she was innocent. When the police arrived, the hallucinations told her to harm herself. She complied with these voices. Bryn insisted that she could not resist because the voices in her head had complete control over her. She could not even drop the knife when the police asked her to, until they broke her arm. Bryn believed that she was suffering from drug-induced psychosis at the time. She was eventually charged with first-degree murder, but she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Preliminary hearings took place and her bail was set at $500,000, which she paid, allowing her to await trial at home. During this time, the police continued to investigate and Bryn's attorney repeatedly requested adjournments. And Chad's murder trial was set for October 23, 2023, but a new district attorney took office a month earlier, causing further delays. The trial finally began on November 9, 2023. The new prosecutor reduced her charges to manslaughter, which shocked the victim's family. They could not understand how someone could accidentally stab the victim more than 100 times. Remarkably, all of this took so long that Chad's mother did not live to see the trial and never saw justice. She passed away in 2020. The court psychiatrist concluded that Bryn suffered from a psychotic disorder caused by smoking. This decision was supported by other experts, and according to the prosecution, they did not have enough evidence to refute this conclusion. During the trial, Chad's family insisted that it was a deliberate massacre and demanded punishment. The defense argued that Bryn's behavior showed signs of psychosis. She was not aware of her actions, first stabbing her boyfriend and then hitting him multiple times. A police officer using a stun gun was unable to stop her, and they were only able to take the knife away after breaking her arm with 9 blows from her baton. This behavior showed that she was psychotic. However, according to Bryn, she understood what was happening. She remembered everything and claimed that she saw the murder as the only way to survive. She was aware of her actions and made her own decisions, despite experiencing hallucinations. Her arguments were strongly opposed by her attorneys. As a result, the defense continued to delay the trial, which lasted for 5 years. The main issues in dispute were whether there was intent to kill Chad and whether Bryn used the drug voluntarily. Under California law, a person can be held responsible for such crimes while under the influence of drugs or alcohol if it can be proven that the use was voluntary. If the drug was coerced, the killing is considered unintentional. This must be proven. The prosecution pointed to numerous letters from the girl, in which Bryn repeatedly told friends that she had been drinking. She also mentioned smoking occasionally, suggesting that this was not her first time using. The prosecution argued that on the day Chad was killed, she also used the drug voluntarily, as she had done before. Many colleagues defended Bryn, describing her as a very responsible person. She had no criminal record and no one could testify that she was capable of causing such a psychotic episode. However, this claim seems dubious, given her medical history, which should have made her aware of the potential consequences. She defended herself by saying that she was unsure what drugs her boyfriend had smoked and given her that night and believed he had given them to her intentionally. No other drugs were found in his home. Bryn's parents defended her, claiming that she had no romantic relationship with Chad and that she was acting in self-defense against harassment. They attempted to portray her as a heroine. However, friends on both sides disagreed, saying that Chad and Bryn had been together for nearly 2 months, had an intimate relationship, and that everyone knew about it. Chad's relatives denied any allegations of violence against him. They described him as respectful of women and noted that although he had a smoking habit, which his parents had advised him to quit, it was legal and had never caused any problems. They insisted he was not aggressive, so they did not believe he would attack his girlfriend. Throughout the trial, Bryn showed no remorse for what had happened. The only time she cried was when the brutal details of her arrest were described. She could recall the intense pain of being beaten with a baton. The case was complex, controversial, and attracted considerable public attention. Many were puzzled as to how a seemingly kind-hearted girl, dedicated to helping others, could commit a brutal murder. The jury then deliberated on the verdict. The jury then found Bryn Spejcher, 32, guilty of manslaughter. Bryn showed emotion for the second time during the trial. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. At that point, she was focused only on her sentence. She did not care that she had caused serious harm to her loved one. Bryn simply did not want to take responsibility for her actions. Chad's father spoke to reporters, expressing his frustration with the justice system's decision, which he considered unfair. He also pointed to inconsistencies in Bryn's testimony. She contradicted herself. For example, she initially described her boyfriend as a nice young man who was easy to talk to. However, when the subject of smoking was brought up, Bryn admitted that she had always been afraid of him and then began to deny that they had a relationship. Chad's father said that Bryn did not want to take responsibility for her terrible actions and tried to blame Chad for the bloody massacre to reduce her sentence. The father could not believe that the court would seriously consider that a person could accidentally inflict more than 100 wounds on another person. His son's death was not simple or painless. Chad had suffered a lot, and now the killer was trying to blame him with lies. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Bryn smoked of her own free will, and Chad had never forced her to take drugs when she did not like them. However, psychiatric experts confirmed that Bryn's psychosis was caused by the drug. This was one of the first cases where a voluntary user was justified in using drugs. And while awaiting the verdict, the girl was released on bail. On January 24, 2024, Bryn Spejcher was sentenced to 2 years of probation in order to complete 100 hours of community service. The judge justified the lenient sentence by stating that Bryn was not in control of his actions during a psychotic episode, making a reduced sentence appropriate. The attorney applauded the court's decision, calling it the right thing to do. However, Chad's father was unhappy with the ruling, arguing that the judge had set a dangerous precedent. He said the decision implied that marijuana users in California were being given a license to kill. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Rachel Anderson. Rachel Anderson was born on January 28, 1994, in Warren, Ohio, to William, Bill Anderson and Patricia, Trish Anderson. She had a younger brother named John, who was a favorite in the family. Rachel graduated from Warren Harding High School in 2012, where she was a member of the National Honor Society and participated in soccer and volleyball. Uniquely, Rachel aspired to be a funeral director since she was a child. She studied at Youngstown State University, focusing on the study of human remains. She took her studies seriously, which helped her rank among the top students and earn a scholarship. Afterward, she attended Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science, graduating in 2016 with a Bachelor of Science in Mortuary Science. Following her graduation, Rachel joined the Ohio Funeral Directors Association and moved to Columbus to begin her internship at Shaw Davis Funeral Home. She approached her work with deep respect and felt a responsibility to support and assist the families of the deceased. Rachel's internship was nearing its conclusion, and she aspired to secure a permanent position at the Bureau. Unfortunately, her hopes for the future were abruptly shattered. On January 29, 2018, the staff of Shaw Davis Funeral Home was alarmed by the absence of everyone's favorite assistant, Rachel, at work. She did not answer the phone, which worried them because she was very responsible and took her work seriously. The department head asked a coworker to go to Rachel's apartment to check on her and find out why she had been absent in silence. He went to her apartment, but no one answered his knock or call. He contacted the manager of the apartment complex, but this attempt was unsuccessful, as it was only possible to enter the apartment with the tenant's permission. Her colleague then called the police to the residence of She. When they went inside, they found nothing scary. The apartment looked completely normal, except for the leftover food on the table. Noted that Rachel, who adored order, couldn't leave food without putting it away in the refrigerator. This caught the attention of her coworker, who insisted on a more thorough inspection of the apartment in the presence of police officers. During the inspection of the bedroom, he tried to look in a closet, but when he wanted to open the door, he thought something was wrong. With effort, he yanked the closet door open and screamed. Hidden inside was Rachel's bloody body. Officer Frank Scaney called forensics, and the apartment complex area was cordoned off. In her own apartment, Rachel Anderson's bound body was discovered in a bedroom closet. She was stripped to the waist and partially wrapped in a blanket. Her head was wrapped in a shirt, and a black article of clothing was tied around her neck, with part of the fabric stuffed into her mouth as a gag. The autopsy of Rachel Anderson revealed the horrific violence she endured that night. She had been both strangled and stabbed. The examination showed that she suffered a cut on her scalp and fractures at the base of her skull. A stab wound penetrated the back of her neck and extended into the left side of her brain, applied with such force that it shattered part of her skull. Additionally, the autopsy confirmed she was strangled with a cord from an electric blanket, which led to bleeding in her sternoclavicular muscles and eyelids, and caused her eye blood vessels to burst. Forensic evidence showed that Rachel had bruises and red marks on her ankles and wrists, indicating she was alive when the suspect tied her up. A DNA sample was found on the rope and on Rachel's body. The coroner concluded that Rachel died from stab wounds to the head and neck, contradicting the previous theory that she had been strangled. After interviewing several employees from Rachel's workplace and her ex-boyfriend, who provided an alibi, the police investigated various theories related to the attack. Detectives returned to the victim's apartment to search for evidence about the attacker. They found Rachel's purse on the living room floor, but her purse was empty. 2 weeks after the crime, Rachel's mother discovered a 9-inch steak knife, which had been used to stab Rachel, in a box in her apartment. This led detectives to initially think it was a robbery. However, the violent nature of the attack indicated that the attacker was not just a thief, but rather a maniac who took pleasure in dominating the victim. Investigators considered various motives but had no suspects for a while. The details of her death were kept confidential to maintain the investigation's integrity. After a while, the investigation obtained DNA samples from different areas of Rachel's body and the crime scene. Unfortunately, these samples did not match any records in the Special Criminal Database. Surveillance cameras on the street recorded 2 people driving Rachel's car around the city after her death. During this time, cash was taken out from her debit and credit cards. Furthermore, location data revealed a phone number that was in Rachel's apartment between 7:59 p.m. and 9:25 p.m. on January 28, 2018. Investigators examined the evidence to determine the caller's locations at particular times. By tracking the phone number, they identified the suspect as 54-year-old Anthony Pardon. He has an extensive criminal history, which includes several rapes, robbery, kidnapping, and attempted murder, prior to the murder of Rachel. He has spent a total of 33 years in prison for his crimes. The man had a difficult upbringing. He was raised by his grandparents before moving in with his mother. As a child, he was diagnosed with conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder because of social challenges. In March 1979, at the age of 14, Anthony was temporarily committed to the Ohio Youth Commission. Later that July, he was placed under court custody and transferred to Franklin County Children's Services. By December of that year, he was again found guilty of making threats and was moved back to the Ohio Youth Commission, where he entered foster care. In 1980, Anthony was adopted by a family. He was charged with abuse involving the son of his foster parents. The son was 15 years old at the time of the incident, which occurred while Anthony was babysitting. His foster mother had gone grocery shopping. Anthony later informed the Columbus police that he committed the crime out of anger following an argument with his girlfriend. As a result, Anthony was placed under supervised probation as a minor. On November 13, 1981, 16-year-old Anthony was permitted to visit his girlfriend's mother, who was 39, to use the phone. Instead of asking for help, he threatened her with a butcher knife, assaulted her, and stole $100 from her purse. He then tied her hands and feet, gagged her, and put her in the trunk of his car. Anthony drove to Valleydale, where he untied her feet and threw her into the river behind the Valleydale Ballroom. When he saw that she was partially clothed and able to stay afloat, he waded into the creek and forced her head underwater. Luckily, she was rescued by a passerby who frightened Anthony away. The boy then escaped before the police came, using the money he had stolen from her to buy tennis shoes and workout clothes. In May 1982, at the age of 17, he was convicted of other crimes in Franklin and received a prison sentence of 5 to 25 years. During his time in prison, he committed several rule violations, such as possessing a weapon, setting a mattress on fire, and engaging in fights. Overall, he spent more than 24 years in prison for his crimes and was released in November 2006. After gaining his freedom, Anthony moved to Georgia and used a fake name to apply for jobs. In 2007, he was charged with forgery and convicted in Floyd County, resulting in a 9-year prison sentence. He was also sentenced to 20 years probation and required to wear an ankle GPS tracker. In June 2017, Anthony was released from prison and returned to Ohio. Due to an interstate agreement between Ohio and Georgia, he was monitored by the Adult Parole Authority and had to check in with the Sheriff's Department every 90 days. The Ohio Adult Parole Authority failed to provide a monitoring device as requested by the judge, citing concerns about the duration of supervision and budget constraints. As a result of this negligence, known criminal was allowed to roam free. On August 21, 2017, Anthony was discovered with a prostitute in his car. Just 6 days later, he was stopped for driving without a license. During this encounter, the police found a kitchen knife and a shotgun in his possession, yet, oddly enough, he was not arrested. And now, Anthony is the prime suspect in the murder of Rachel Anderson. One piece of CCTV footage shows Rachel's car parked outside a store. A man exited the passenger side and entered the store, but the driver was not seen on the footage, complicating matters. After the police interviewed store employees, they were able to identify the man as Slits, a local vagrant. A few days later, he was questioned at the police station. He stated that he was approached by an older man passing by, who had offered him the opportunity to cash in cards belonging to his ex-girlfriend. Slits accepted the offer, which made him a co-conspirator in the case involving Rachel Anderson. Slits confirmed the identity of Anthony and detailed the route they took on January 28, 2018, while trying to use Rachel's stolen credit cards. On February 9, 2018, after several days of surveillance at his sister's house, law enforcement successfully arrested Anthony Pardon. The 54-year-old, who had previous convictions, faced 9 charges, including aggravated burglary, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, rape, and aggravated murder. On February 4, 2020, the long-awaited trial began. On the first day, 4 witnesses took the stand, including Jonathan Kennedy, a co-worker of Rachel's who found Anderson's body. The manager of Rachel's apartment complex also provided testimony. Officer Frank, who was parked outside the apartment when Jonathan found the body and had seen the surveillance footage, testified as well. Rachel's younger brother, John, and Special Agent Joshua Durst gave their testimonies on February 5, while lead detective Art Hughes testified on February 6. On February 6, the inmate expressed his dissatisfaction with his attorneys to the judge and requested new legal representation. Anthony was intentionally delaying the process. On February 10, prosecutors presented a latent print expert and other specialists to explain how technology identified the locations where Rachel's debit card was used, including at the crime scene. The defendant's sister testified that he had given her Rachel's debit card, and claiming it belonged to his girlfriend. Later, she became aware through television news reports that the card actually belonged to Rachel. The final day of testimony was Tuesday, February 11th. The medical examiner confirmed that Anthony's DNA was found at the crime scene. A forensic pathologist and a deputy coroner from the Franklin County office discussed Rachel's injuries. In the courtroom, the timeline of Rachel's final days was recounted in detail. Rachel celebrated her 24th birthday on January 26 and 27, 2018. On the 26th, her younger brother John came from Warren to Columbus to see her. The following day, they went to the home of her friend and colleague, Jonathan Kennedy, to host a birthday party for Rachel. After a long night of festivities, Rachel and John stayed at a friend's house. The next day, Rachel went to work, leaving her apartment key with John. On the 28th, John returned to his hometown and accidentally brought a key with him. At around 1 p.m., Rachel texted John, who had a key to her house, saying she would come by to pick it up. After speaking with her mother around 6:30 p.m., Rachel went to John's place to collect her key. Since her apartment door could only be locked from the outside with a key, Rachel had to leave it unlocked. She stopped for dinner at her favorite restaurant and arrived back at her apartment around 7:30 p.m. When she returned to the apartment, Anthony was waiting outside. He abducted Rachel, taking her from the bottom floor to the top floor. Using excessive force, he restrained her by binding her feet and ankles with a hair dryer cord and tied her hands with a belt and blinds cords. Once she was immobilized, he wrapped a curling iron cord around her wrists to prevent her from screaming and gagged her. The villain forced Rachel to reveal the PIN numbers of her cards. He subjected her to torture and exploitation. Ultimately, he strangled her with a cord from an electric blanket. In addition to strangulation, he also caused blunt force trauma and inflicted a stab wound to her head. Afterward, he concealed her body in a closet, leaving her naked from the waist down with the electric blanket cord tied around her neck and a door handle. He then stole her car and used her bank card at multiple stores in Columbus to make withdrawals. The defense did not present any witnesses. The final hearing took place on February 12. Assistant prosecutor delivered the state's opening-closing argument, outlining the sequence of events of the crime and telling the jury that Anthony killed Rachel in cold blood. In response, the defense attorney, Larry Thomas, admitted that Anthony had used the victim's credit cards but claimed that he was not responsible for the murder. He argued that the state's case relied heavily on speculation and that the DNA and cell phone evidence did not conclusively link Anthony to the crime. The jury, consisting of 4 men and 8 women, deliberated for about 6 hours over 2 days before finding him guilty on all counts. The prosecution pursued the death penalty for Anthony Pardon due to his involvement in the aggravated burglary that resulted in the death of Rachel Anderson, as well as his previous conviction for trying to murder another woman. Prosecutors decided against seeking clemency because of Anthony's extensive criminal record. The sentencing phase of the trial started on February 18th. The defense tried to reduce the severity of the sentence by highlighting Anthony's troubled childhood, but this argument was ineffective. Prosecutors argued that the seriousness of the crime outweighed any considerations for mitigation. Additionally, it was proven during the trial that Anthony was fully aware of his actions when he attacked Rachel. Anthony's mother, sister, a psychologist, and his former elementary school teacher all testified on his behalf. On February 19th, Anthony gave a 13-minute unscripted statement to the jury, where he talked about his abusive childhood. He described the difficulties he faced after leaving prison, expressing feelings of hardship and helplessness. Anthony stated that the legal system had failed him and that he received no assistance. In his concluding remarks, he assigned blame to the justice system for his current state, without addressing the crime directly or offering an apology. On February 20th, after 3.5 hours of discussion, the jury was unable to reach a decision on whether to recommend the death penalty. Instead, they suggested a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing occurred on March 16, 2020. In court, Rachel's mother, Patricia, wept when the verdict was read. Her father, William, shared a statement reflecting on his experiences during the investigation over the past few years. He was shocked by the behavior of a violent criminal and repeat offender. In the final judgment, the judge sentenced Anthony to consecutive life sentences without parole for aggravated murder and violent crimes, plus 63 additional years for aggravated burglary, kidnapping, and robbery, among other offenses. Rachel Anderson was laid to rest at Pine View Memorial Park. Every year on January 28th, her loved ones light a candle in her memory and remember the cheerful, blonde-haired Rachel. She was a beautiful soul who would do anything for her friends. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Nicole Vanderheyden. Nicole met Douglas in January 2015. At the time, she had been through a marriage, 2 children, and a divorce. After they began dating, Nicole and Douglas began living together, and within a few months, Nicole discovered she was pregnant. Both Douglas and Nicole were excited about the prospect of raising children together. In May 2016, Nicole, Douglas, and their 3 children, the youngest of whom was 6 months old, lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin. On Friday night, May 20th, the couple decided to attend a concert to get some time off. They had arranged for a babysitter to look after the children while they were away at the concert. A photo was taken of Nicole happily chatting with Douglas and his friends. As the concert was coming to an end, Nicole and her friends decided to go to another bar to extend the night. Douglas said he would go to the bar after finishing a conversation with a friend. Surveillance footage showed Nicole having a good time at the bar while Douglas had not yet arrived to join her. After a while, Nicole became angry and sent him a text message, accusing him of being unfaithful. At around 12:30 a.m., she tried calling Douglas, but he did not answer. Feeling annoyed, Nicole asked a friend to call Douglas from their phone and he answered. Nicole was upset that Douglas had ignored her calls. She got up and walked towards the exit, although her friends tried to stop her, but could not stop her from leaving. Annoyed, Nicole ran out into the street, turned the corner of the building and disappeared into the dark night. When Douglas and his friends realized she was gone, they began searching for her. They drove around the nearby streets, but could not find her. They eventually returned to the bar, had a few more drinks, and then went home. At around 5:30 a.m., Douglas called the police to report that his girlfriend, Nicole Vanderheyden, was missing. He gave her a description of her appearance. That same day, a local farmer contacted the police after finding the body of a woman in tall grass near his farm in Brown County. At first, he thought it might be an animal, but upon closer inspection, he noticed her blonde hair. The woman was found naked, except for socks and a pink bracelet on her wrist. There was a lot of blood in the area, and she had severe injuries to her face. When the police examined the body, they confirmed that it matched Douglas' description, identifying the deceased as Nicole. The location where her body was found was just 3 miles from Nicole's family home. Douglas was called in for questioning. He explained that he and a friend had left a bar that night around 2:30 a.m. His friend had dropped him off at around 3 a.m. After entering the house, Ditry went to sleep and woke up around 5:30 a.m. He realized Nicole had not returned home and immediately called the police to report her missing. Ditry maintained his innocence and denied any involvement in Nicole's disappearance or death. He was shocked when police informed him that Nicole's body had been found at the farm. At the same time, police obtained a search warrant for Douglas' home. During the search, they found blood on the garage floor and in the back seat of their car. Additionally, a pair of Air Jordan sneakers were discovered in the garage, matching the shoe prints found at the scene where Nicole died. Blood stains were also found on the soles of the sneakers. In the early morning hours of May 21st, a patrol officer found several items belonging to Nicole along a freeway approximately 2 miles from where her body was found. These items included her purse, cell phone, and clothing, and were found near a building across the street from her home. At this location, police also discovered numerous blood stains and several locks of blonde hair, as well as a phone charger. Police collected more than 70 pieces of evidence and sent them for forensic analysis. They worked to reconstruct the events of the tragic night that led to Nicole Vanderheyden's death. Initially, police believed that a confrontation had occurred between Douglas and Nicole as she returned home that night, leading to the crime taking place outside. They believed Nicole had been killed about 120 feet from her front door. As a result, Douglas was arrested and taken into custody. However, after 18 days, forensic analysis revealed that the blood found in the garage, car, and near the neighbor's house did not belong to Nicole. In fact, it was not human blood at all. Furthermore, the stains on his sneakers were not blood. On the night of the incident, Douglas wore a fitness tracker on his wrist that recorded his movements. This data supported his statement to the police. He drove home that night, checked on his children, and then went to bed. As a result, Douglas was cleared of all suspicion and released from custody. The investigation team wanted to understand why Nicole had come so close to her home, especially since her body was discovered just 3 miles away. They reviewed surveillance footage from a bridge in Green Bay and hypothesized that if Nicole had been walking, she would have crossed that bridge. However, they found no useful clues. A key finding was that blood samples taken from Nicole's clothing, garage, car, and neighbor's yard did not match her DNA. Instead, they belonged to an unidentified man. This created a major obstacle for forensic experts, who were unable to definitively identify him. However, a breakthrough came in August, nearly 3 months after the traumatic incident. The forensic lab informed police that they had successfully isolated DNA material from one of Nicole's socks. The DNA sample was comprehensive and reliable. When they entered the DNA results into the national database, they found the name of George Stephen Birch, a man who had lived in Virginia. George moved to Green Bay, Wisconsin, on March 1, 2016, in search of a fresh start. A longtime friend gave him a place to stay and helped him find a job. The friend also loaned George a red Chevrolet Blazer, which was later involved in an accident and caught fire. A few weeks after Nicole Vanderheyden's death, police ran a background check on George in the local police database and found a report of a car accident involving him. The report led them to his address. Police then went to George's neighborhood and saw him on his porch. Police confiscated his cell phone. The team working on the Nicole case requested a copy of the data from George's phone. By analyzing cell tower records, local Wi-Fi networks, and GPS data, police determined that on the night of Nicole's disappearance, George was at a bar just a half-mile from where Nicole was staying with friends. GPS data showed that at 2:30 a.m., he left the bar and drove to Nicole's house, staying there for about an hour before going to the farmhouse where Nicole's body was eventually found. He then went to the location where her clothes were found. By 4:22 a.m., George had returned to his home. 4 months after Nicole's death, George was arrested and charged with first-degree intentional homicide. On February 19, 2018, George went to trial. His defense team attempted to blame Nicole's boyfriend, Douglas. However, prosecutors believed that Douglas had nothing to do with her death. They presented evidence from his health monitor, which showed that he had been asleep during the time Nicole was brutally attacked near the farm. On the third day of the trial, Douglas testified, revealing that he and Nicole had planned to get married and had discussed it on the night of the tragic event. He said they were enjoying the concert and had been drinking, although Nicole was not usually a heavy drinker. But she had drunk more than usual that night. When Nicole decided to go to another bar with friends first, Douglas and his friends chose to stay at the concert venue to continue partying, including drinking and drug use. Douglas admitted that he had spent some time with Nicole at the bar, and during that time he had received angry messages from her accusing him of being unfaithful. Nicole had called him several times and eventually her phone battery died. Douglas expressed his confusion and concern about Nicole's anger toward him that night, and he adamantly denied any connection to her disappearance and subsequent death. Shortly after Douglas testified in court, George's defense attorney presented a key piece of evidence: text messages that Douglas had sent to his mother just 10 days before the incident. In one message, Douglas stated, "I'm actually thinking about telling Nicole and the kids that they have to move out." He later explained that the messages were not intended to be taken seriously. Additionally, George's attorney presented testimony from Douglas's former girlfriends, who described him as a jealous and controlling person who often treated them badly. One ex-girlfriend even claimed that he had installed a tracking device on her phone to monitor her movements on the night of Nicole's disappearance. After Nicole's tragic death, she confronted Douglas, accusing him of not only being unfaithful but also cruel. Douglas continued to deny all allegations and maintained that he had never been unfaithful to Nicole, nor had he ever raised a hand against her. In court, the nanny who was at Douglas and Nicole's home the night they attended the concert testified. She recalled asking Douglas where Nicole was when he returned. Douglas replied, he didn't know. She hit her head and just wanted to walk home. On the 8th day of the trial, George Birch presented his account of the events of that night. He began by describing himself as a hard worker and a caring family man. On the evening of May 20th, he was at a bar where he met Nicole. George claimed that they had flirted and that he felt Nicole was open to his advances. He described their conversation as friendly, lasting until the bar closed at around 2:30 a.m. He then drove her home, parking near the driveway to continue the conversation for a few more minutes. George explained that they had consensual sex in his car, with Nicole participating. He said that he could not sit comfortably in the back seat because of his size, so he stood by the open back door while Nicole remained inside. After their intimate moment, he suddenly felt an attack from behind that knocked him unconscious. When he regained consciousness, he was lying on the ground and saw Douglas nearby, pointing a gun at him. There was a lot of blood around, and George said he was not sure if Nicole was still alive at that time. When Douglas arrived at the farm, he was armed and carried Nicole's body into the tall grass. He later described a sudden confrontation with Douglas. George used force to push Douglas to the ground. He then said he was able to get away from Douglas and returned to his car. George then fled the scene and threw Nicole's belongings out of the car window. The next day, George went fishing with friends, including a photo taken on May 21st. Notably, he did not report the incident to the police or tell his friends what happened that night. The prosecutor argued that George's testimony was highly suspect. Nicole would not have willingly agreed to satisfy a man she barely knew, especially by exposing her buttocks out of the car window at her own home. The prosecutor argued that George intended to have sex with Nicole in his car, but she refused. When she tried to leave the car, George became angry. He grabbed a phone charger and used it to strangle her, then stripped her down to her socks. He then dumped her body in clothes and went home, hoping to avoid being caught. The prosecutor argued that George's story was full of contradictions. After the attack, dumping of the body, and escape, George went fishing with friends the next day and seemed to be having a good time. Additionally, the prosecutor showed the court Nicole's dirty clothes. If George's testimony was correct, her clothes would have been clean, since George had said she had taken them off in his car. However, in reality, Nicole's clothes were covered in blood and dirt, indicating that she had resisted while wearing them on the ground. Throughout the trial, 2 women were present, closely watching George and listening to everything he said. These women were identified as the sister and fiancée of Joey White, who died in 1997. The suspect in White's death was George Birch, White's neighbor. Although George was acquitted and released at the time, White's fiancée and sister continued to believe that he was responsible for the death of their loved one. After 19 days of testimony and jury deliberations, the judge announced his verdict. George Birch was found guilty of attempted murder. Although the judge believed George deserved the death penalty, state law mandated a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Douglas was relieved, as he had been worried about facing new charges in Nicole's death. Without the evidence from the fitness bracelet, he would still have faced prison time. George Birch was sentenced to life in prison, ensuring that he would never hurt anyone again. Nicole's children are now being raised by their biological fathers. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Hannah Potts. After Hannah Potts, 23, went missing, an investigation involving the FBI began. The case received a lot of media attention, and the unraveling of the mysterious disappearance shocked many people. Hannah grew up in a large family in Gibson County, Indiana, a rural area where many people make a living from farming. Her family owned a small farm, which her parents considered a safe and ideal place to work, live, and raise their children. The summer of 2020 was a turning point for Hannah's family, after which their lives changed forever. On July 23, Hannah was struggling with insomnia. She told her mother that she was going to go out for a walk around the farm, check on the animals, and maybe take some pictures. Hannah then took her phone and camera and left the house and headed toward the barn. The next morning, the family was shocked to discover Hannah was missing. Adding to their worries, a disturbing post appeared on her Facebook page, a video, largely black, suggesting it had been recorded in the dark. Hannah desperately pleaded, "Mom, can you hear me? Please talk to me, I really need to hear your voice right now. Something bad happened. I was taking pictures of animals and the man grabbed me. I think he was trying to scare me. He was about as tall as Jerry and had a deep voice. He said he wanted to help me, but I didn't believe him. I'm in a room with 4 walls and a little light. I have my phone with me and I want you to know that they know about this. Please talk, you have to tell the police everything that's going on. They can find me by looking at the videos or pictures on my phone." That man mentioned Ohio, but I'm not sure exactly where. Please tell everyone that I love them, and if I don't make it back, know that I love you all very much. Hannah's parents quickly alerted the police, and given the circumstances and the fact that even minutes can change everything in such cases, the FBI launched an investigation. News of the abduction spread quickly on social media and was picked up by major television stations across the country by the end of the day. Extensive media coverage was garnered, with a large number of volunteers joining Hannah's family in distributing thousands of informational flyers. The flyers included a description of Hannah's last known appearance. She was wearing a gray shirt and sweatpants when she was last seen at home around 2 a.m. The abductor's vehicle, a maroon sedan, was also described. Police appealed to the public for any information that could assist the investigation. Hannah's family used every resource at their disposal to find her, including using social media to quickly spread information about the abduction. Hannah's twin sister, Lauren, created a social media post to spread the word and seek support. The post read, "She is reaching out with a heavy heart, and she never thought she would be in this situation. She needs the help of her friends and family. Please share this post and the attached photo." If you have any information about her twin sister Hannah's disappearance, please contact the Princeton, Indiana Police Department or her family. Hannah posted a video earlier describing her kidnapping, and Lauren is desperate for her safe return home. The FBI attempted to locate Hannah by tracking her cell phone. On the day of her kidnapping, a cell tower a few miles from Hannah's family home picked up a signal from her phone. Around 6 a.m., Hannah posted a video to her Facebook page, but by then she was in custody. Her phone continued to pin to a nearby cell tower, indicating that she was likely being held at a location not far from her family home. Meanwhile, police had a lead on a suspect driving a maroon car, but they were unable to find anyone matching the description within a 5-mile radius of Hannah's home. While digging into Hannah's life and trying to find out if anyone she knew could be involved in her disappearance, police discovered that before she went missing, she had been in contact with a 34-year-old woman named Maria Hopper, who lived just a mile from their home. Police arrived to speak with Maria, who confirmed that she knew Hannah but said that she had last seen her a few days before the kidnapping. This seemed like another dead end, but when police obtained a cell phone carrier report and were able to access Hannah's social media page, where she had posted her heartbreaking plea, it became clear that Maria Hopper had lied when she said she had seen Hannah a few days before the kidnapping. Hannah went missing in the early morning hours of July 24th. 2 days later, on July 26th, police visited Maria's home. During this visit, Maria told police that she had no information about Hannah's whereabouts. Maria's boyfriend, Joshua Thomas, 45, was also present and claimed he did not know Hannah. The police asked Maria for permission to look around the house. The woman reluctantly agreed but immediately stated that Hannah was not in her house. The police found nothing suspicious inside except for a staircase in the kitchen leading down to the basement. Maria said that there was nothing but unnecessary things in the basement, but the police decided to check the basement themselves. In the basement, the police discovered a strange piece of plywood that stood out among the other dusty items. Its cleanliness suggested that it had not been stored there as long as the other items. Furthermore, it appeared to be blocking the entrance to a separate area of the basement. As an officer began to remove the plywood, Maria interjected with an important statement. Before we continue, however, let's review the recording Hannah made. When shared on social media, many were quick to point out the strangeness and incongruity of Hannah's actions in the video. She recorded a 6-minute video, raising questions about why she prioritized her time filming instead of calling for help immediately. It is also unclear why the kidnapper did not search her and confiscate her phone. The purpose of the video is also puzzling, especially since it was filmed at 2 a.m. on a farm. Additionally, her initial claim of being kidnapped by a man was later contradicted when she mentioned they, referring to multiple kidnappers. Despite having internet access and the ability to post on social media, she did not use this opportunity to identify her location and potentially seek help. Police have noted unusual behavior surrounding Hannah's disappearance. However, since people react differently to stress, they initially treated her disappearance as a kidnapping. The investigation was ongoing until police obtained records of communications between Hannah and Maria, which led to a breakthrough. At Maria's home, when an officer asked about a piece of plywood in the basement, Maria confessed that Hannah had been hiding behind it. The officer then pushed the plywood aside and ordered her to come toward him. When Hannah emerged, the officer found her right hand cuffed and her legs still working. The woman immediately admitted to the police that no one had kidnapped her and that she was sitting in the basement of her own free will. It turned out that Hannah had planned her own kidnapping with the assistance of Maria Hopper and Joshua Thomas. This became clear through their social media exchanges. The tone, content, and context of the messages read like fiction. The three were taken to the police station for further investigation after their arrest. As the police tried to understand the motive behind the incident, Hannah explained that she was an aspiring author writing a book. In an effort to gain inspiration and gain a deeper understanding of the experiences of kidnapping victims, Hannah decided to stage her own fake kidnapping. To achieve this, she enlisted the help of her friends Maria and Joshua, who became characters in her story. According to Hannah, her friends helped her plan and carry out the fake kidnapping by hiding her in their basement, providing her with food and drinks, and deliberately destroying her cell phone to avoid detection by the police. Hannah filmed a video of the alleged kidnapping and posted it on her Facebook page, causing great concern and distress to her family and others. Hannah rehearsed the video for about a week before making it without telling her family members about her plans. After the truth was revealed, her family apologized to everyone involved in the search and those who were concerned for her safety. Hannah's sister, Lauren, took to social media to publicly apologize and express her feelings about the situation. In her statement, Lauren said her family was deeply hurt and embarrassed by Hannah's actions, and they felt betrayed. Lauren made it clear that she no longer wanted any relationship with her sister and hoped Hannah would be held accountable for her actions. Lauren also addressed her concerns about Hannah's story targeting a person of color with a specific description of the car. She prayed that no one would be unfairly targeted or harmed because of her sister's false statements. Additionally, Lauren expressed regret for the pain her family has endured, including her 6-year-old son, who was deeply affected by Hannah's dishonesty. Hannah Potts kept a personal journal in her friend's basement in which she wrote that she expected her social media post to go viral. As a result of her actions, she is now facing charges of falsely reporting her own abduction. According to Gibson County Prosecutor Michael Cochran, Hannah's actions were not only criminal, but also caused significant distress to her family and everyone around her. Furthermore, by providing a false description of her alleged abductor, Hannah put innocent people at risk of mistaken identity. Furthermore, the case wasted valuable time and resources as multiple law enforcement agencies were involved in the investigation. In a time of limited resources, these wasted hours can never be recovered. Prosecutor Cochran stressed that such a callous disregard for others will not be tolerated. Maria Hopper and Joshua Thomas were charged with perjury and assisting in the concealment of a kidnapping hoax. During a police interview, Hopper admitted to picking up Hannah Potts from her home and lying about hiding her. Thomas also admitted to knowing about the staged kidnapping and Hannah's presence in his home. All three individuals are free on bail and awaiting trial. In September 2020, Hannah Potts pleaded guilty to filing a false kidnapping report. As a result, she was sentenced to 1 year of probation and 120 hours of community service. Joshua Thomas and Maria Hopper were also sentenced to probation. Some people who know this story believe that Hannah Potts faked her kidnapping to inspire her book and to attract attention to herself, which she hoped would boost her book's sales.